Welcome back to the Iraqi Dinar channel, the #1 trusted source for breaking RV alerts, insider financial briefings and exclusive exchange updates. If you are holding IQD RV, this could be the most important update you have heard this year, because the signals that many believed would never arrive are finally breaking into the open. The numbers are real, the silence has ended, and for the first time in decades the proof is flashing on live financial screens. The Iraqi Dinar has surged to 6.73 while the Vietnamese Dong is now positioned at 4.39 per 1,000 units. These are not whispered claims or projections but actual figures visible inside the secured systems of some of the most powerful banks in the world. What's more, institutions that maintained calculated silence for months, including Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, and the Central Bank of Iraq, have now issued confirmations that are shaking the entire RV community at its core. For those who have waited year after year for something tangible, the moment has come. For years the debate consumed online forums, chat rooms, and financial circles. Economists argued over feasibility, skeptics dismissed it as rumor, and hopeful holders clung to insider whispers. Would the revaluation of the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong ever leave the realm of speculation and finally cross into verifiable numbers supported by banking institutions? That question has now been answered. The revaluation has reached a threshold moment where speculation becomes confirmation. The figures of 6.73 per dinar and 439 per dong are no longer theoretical models, they are hard-coded into the restricted digital portals of Tier 1 banking networks. These are not projections by optimistic traders or exaggerated claims from anonymous blogs but institutional rates backed by the very banks responsible for executing the transition. Only 2 days ago the first tremors of confirmation spread as select private banking clients began reporting changes on their in-branch systems. At Chase Bank and Wells Fargo the long elusive green light status appeared, showing locked-in rates alongside full verification protocols. One Miami-based client, a Tier 3 account holder who had monitored these screens for months with frustration, admitted to being stunned when the digits appeared before his eyes. He stated plainly that the dinar displayed 6.73 while the dong showed 439, and in that moment years of uncertainty gave way to visible confirmation. From their momentum accelerated rapidly. Word leaked that the Central Bank of Iraq's electronic authorization network distributed back-end rate sheets to redemption partners across 19 states, a move signaling the process had moved out of rumor and into structured deployment. From Baghdad to Los Angeles the message was consistent, the rate was now factual, and the only question remaining was whether holders were ready to step into the exchange process when their time arrived. For 90 days the largest financial institutions in the United States had built an impenetrable wall of silence around this event. Chase, Wells Fargo, and the Central Bank of Iraq enforced that silence with non-disclosure agreements, guarded language, and stone-faced denials whenever the subject surfaced. Many attempts to gain information from banking representatives were met with the same reply: no comment, no confirmation, and no acknowledgement of any pending revaluation protocols. Yet while the outside world saw only silence, the inside story was one of careful planning and precision. Behind closed doors teams were finalizing structured liquidity programs, compliance verifications, and interbank reconciliations across multiple jurisdictions. These tasks were not trivial, they were essential to ensure the moment of transition would be smooth and coordinated across global networks. That silence finally cracked when Chase Bank's regional executive distributed a confidential circular to select wealth management clients. The message was blunt and left little room for interpretation. Effective immediately, exchange protocols for IQD and VND under the Structured International Currency Agreement (SYA) were to be activated for approved Tier 4B clients. This was the strongest confirmation yet that Chase had moved from preparation into active authorization, permitting in-branch exchanges for holders who already cleared the compliance gauntlet. Not to be outdone, Wells Fargo followed with a leaked internal memo from their Tier 1 Operations Command. It stated clearly that asset-backed currencies including IQ and VND had entered the verified redemption readiness stage and that appointment windows would open within 72 hours pending payment route confirmation. At almost the same moment the Central Bank of Iraq made a formal declaration broadcast live at 11:35 a.m. Baghdad time. The statement confirmed that the managed rate transition program had entered its final liquidity phase and that international parity with the US dollar was now open. The announcement spread across financial networks like a shockwave, igniting discussions not only among investors but also within government circles and economic think tanks around the globe. For the first time, institutions that had long denied or dismissed the possibility of a revaluation were forced to acknowledge what was unfolding before their very eyes. Financial analysts began dissecting the numbers, comparing historical trends, and assessing the implications for both regional and international markets. The dinar's rise to 6.73 and the dong's placement at 439 were not arbitrary figures but carefully calculated rates that signaled deeper coordination with global monetary framework. Such precision indicated that this shift had been meticulously engineered rather than spontaneously triggered, pointing to months of behind-the-scenes negotiations involving international banking coalitions, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks. In cities like Dubai, Frankfurt, London, and New York, brokers reported unusual spikes in liquidity as hidden channels of capital began flowing into positions aligned with the dinar and dong. Traders whispered that certain hedge funds, which had previously kept distance from speculative currency plays, were now entering positions quietly, securing their allocations before the broader public became aware of what was transpiring. This movement was not driven by retail speculation but by institutional awareness, a sign that the revaluation was not just a national event limited to Iraq and Vietnam but a pivot connected to the larger global financial reset being discussed in closed rooms for years. The sheer volume of money shifting across invisible corridors suggested that the world's financial elite had been waiting for this exact trigger, and were now mobilizing to capitalize on it. Reports also surfaced from inside Iraq that local citizens had begun noticing subtle changes at neighborhood banks. Certain branches adjusted signage, altered transaction procedures, and quietly updated their customer portals. Ordinary Iraqis, long wary of hearing rumors with no results, began realizing something real was occurring. Government officials close to the central bank hinted that this revaluation was tied directly to Iraq's strategic push for sovereignty, allowing the country to reassert control over its resources, oil revenues, and trade relationships. Rather than being manipulated by external forces, Iraq was now in a position to dictate terms, and the sovereign dinar was the centerpiece of that assertion. The announcement from Prime Minister Sudani that Iraq had reclaimed financial sovereignty gave weight to what many had dismissed as speculation, transforming it into a powerful statement of national resurgence. At the same time, Vietnamese officials moved with quiet confidence, signaling their alignment without drawing unnecessary attention. The Dong's rate shift at 439 carried immense implications for Southeast Asia, where regional trade blocs are constantly adjusting to the shifting balance of power between China and Western markets. Vietnam's participation in this revaluation highlighted its growing influence as a manufacturing hub and its readiness to play a bigger role in international commerce. By positioning the Dong alongside the dinar in this coordinated reset, Vietnam demonstrated that it too was ready to break from being perceived as a secondary economy and instead claim its seat at the table of emerging financial powerhouses. Meanwhile, Western media outlets initially avoided coverage but soon could not ignore the weight of the developments. Once financial influencers, independent analysts, and insiders began posting rate confirmations, larger platforms were pressured into addressing the story. Commentators described it as both a disruption and an opportunity, likening the moment to historical resets such as the end of the gold standard or the Bretton Woods agreements. For everyday investors, this sudden validation of what many had held in faith for years felt surreal. The combination of global liquidity movements, official statements from Baghdad, and verification from Tier 1 banks in the United States created an environment where skepticism had little ground left to stand on. For the first time, the alignment between governments, central banks, and private institutions suggested that what was unfolding was part of a deliberate and orchestrated transition into a new economic era. Do you want me to also expand Section 3 into 500 words in the same exact style so it flows consistently with Sections 1 and 2? As the confirmation of rates circulated, attention quickly turned to the logistics of the exchange process itself. Investors who had quietly held their IQD and VND for years began contacting banks, wealth managers, and private brokers, seeking clarity on how redemption would unfold. Within hours, chatter about structured appointments, redemption centers, and tiered processing filled private channels. The notion of a simple walk-in exchange at a teller window was quickly replaced with reports of controlled, invitation-based scheduling, where clients would be directed to designated locations equipped with compliance officers, verification scanners, and security personnel. This indicated that the rollout was far from random and had been carefully designed to maintain order, prevent fraud, and ensure that the financial system absorbed the influx of liquidity in a controlled manner. Details emerged suggesting that not all holders would experience the same process. Tiered groupings based on investment size, historical records, and pre-cleared compliance checks determined who would be contacted first. High net worth individuals with significant holdings were funneled through private wealth desks at banks like Chase and Wells Fargo, while mid-level investors were linked to regional redemption centers with enhanced facilities. Smaller holders, though still included, faced longer wait times as institutions prioritized larger liquidity inflows. These distinctions were not intended to exclude but to stabilize the system, ensuring that the massive sums moving into circulation did not overwhelm banks or trigger panic in the markets. Accounts from insiders revealed that specialized training had been provided to staff months in advance. Bank officers in major metropolitan hubs like New York, Dallas, Miami, and Los Angeles had quietly undergone simulations where they practiced processing exchanges, verifying authenticity of currency, and walking clients through structured contracts that tied into new international banking standards. Security protocols were especially rigorous, with armored transport, biometric identification, and multi-level clearance checks to eliminate risks of counterfeit or unauthorized participation. The sheer sophistication of these preparations confirmed that the event had been long anticipated and carefully orchestrated at the highest levels of financial planning. For many holders, questions revolved around rates and options. Would they receive the full international rate instantly, or would structured payouts and contract terms be presented as alternatives? Early reports hinted that some clients were offered incentive packages tied to longer-term contracts where funds would be held in designated accounts with interest bonuses. Others were given the choice of immediate liquidity at slightly lower terms or extended arrangements promising higher returns. These variations suggested a tailored approach, one that recognized the diversity of holders and balanced the need for immediate redemption with the broader goals of financial stability and controlled money flow. In Iraq itself, ordinary citizens began lining up outside banks as news spread. Families who had held stacks of dinar in hopes of a brighter future finally saw proof that their patience was not in vain. Local branches adjusted their systems to reflect the new rate, while international partners coordinated with the Central Bank of Iraq to ensure parity across borders. The atmosphere inside Baghdad was described as electric, with television anchors reporting live from exchange points, capturing both the excitement and the confusion as people tried to understand the exact procedures. Meanwhile, in the United States and Europe, the focus remained on secure appointments and maintaining confidentiality, with clients reminded to avoid publicizing details until the wider rollout was complete. The ripple effects extended beyond the financial system. Real estate brokers, commodity traders, and private investment groups began preparing for an influx of new capital from clients who, overnight, would shift from ordinary investors to sudden millionaires. Conversations about wealth management, tax planning, and asset diversification surged as advisors scrambled to position themselves to capture business from newly liquid investors. Financial planners who once ignored or ridiculed the RV discussion now sought ways to offer guidance, recognizing that a major redistribution of wealth was quietly underway.